Hang on. And we are
We're
live.
live.
Welcome back, everyone. Christy, as always, good to see you.
Likewise.
Yes. All right, guys, welcome back to Enlightened Health and Healing with me and Dr. Christy. I pointed the wrong way again.
I knew it.
Here bringing you conversations about health, physical health, spiritual health, mental health, and emotional health. So to give you ideas, solutions, strategies to be at your best self and work through whatever tough, hard moment that you're having, or perhaps you're on exactly the right track and you want to keep continuing and strengthening all the things that you have going on. And today, big topic, we are talking about the words that we say to ourselves. And Christy and I had thought a good point to talk about is affirmations and how to, I don't want to say essentially how to effectively write an affirmation, but to some extent, some strategies of how to effectively write an affirmation. With that being said, the first thing I'm going to say is the only wrong way, in my opinion, to write an affirmation is to negatively talk to yourself. Because aside from the negatively talking to yourself, any positive you put behind I am is going to be beneficial in some way, shape, or form. Granted, there are strategies that will help you differently than others. However, that simple art of talking positively to yourself is always helpful. Christy, what do you think about that piece before we go too far?
I love it and completely agree. And we have some friends watching on Facebook, so I want to just shout out and say hello, Dorothy and Nancy. Thanks for joining.
Hi, Nancy. Hi, Dorothy. And hi, Elise. Thank you for joining us. And Dorothy's here as well. Thank you, Dorothy.
Oh, she's watching on 2 different platforms. That's
Yay! Let's take it. Okay, so affirmations, Christy. What are your thoughts initially on affirmations on this topic today?
So my first thought on affirmations, and I know this is jumping way deep and way in, like right away. I love affirmations. I think it can be really, really, really powerful. And only if our subconscious is congruent with what we're trying to say. Because kind of like we alluded to last week, if we say, I'm beautiful, I'm beautiful, I'm beautiful, I'm beautiful, I'm beautiful, but really deep down we think that we're hideous and ugly and we don't believe in ourselves, that's not going to actually penetrate. Is it going to do any harm? No, absolutely not. But it may not have the same impact as if we maybe do a little bit digging on the front end to be sure that we clear out all the old BS that's there so that the affirmation can actually be more impactful.
Yeah. Christy, I'm so glad you brought that up. I have a strategy I want us to come back to on that one.
Awesome.
On how we can get to that point. To your point of what's going to land best for our body, and chemistry wise, making sure our chemistry is on point so that we can accept those really good, healthy words. So first step, when I look at the first step of really developing an effective affirmation, it's number one, the way that I define, looking at the rocks you have in your bag. Throughout life, we pick up all these rocks, we pick up all these things, and it's like, oh, your voice doesn't matter, I'm going to throw that in. We have this, I'm going to throw that in. What are the things that you're carrying around? What are the things that you're already saying to yourself? Get really, really, really clear on that, because some of those voices may be so quiet, you don't even recognize them. And if you look at those voices, if you look at those things of what you're saying to yourself, then we can examine it and we can say, okay, what is this voice thing? Well, I've heard it since I was 4 years old. This voice didn't matter, this embarrassment, whatever it was. We can look at it and we can digest it and we can say, do I want to keeping that story? Is that something I want to keep owning? And then from there, once we know that, from my perspective, then we can look at what's the affirmation that will get me the result of the opposite of that.
Right.
What are your thoughts on those so far, Christy?
I love it and I agree completely. And in truth, even in doing a lot of the work that I've done personally and with patients over the years, that's easier said than done.
Oh, completely.
Is tweezing all that apart and really figuring out what voices are our own, what voices are someone else's that never intended to be ours. And really, it takes a lot of, I mean, I don't want to make it sound hard necessarily, but like, I think to some degree, it's a bit challenging in some ways to really dial back and like pay that close attention to create the awareness of where these BS stories are coming from.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's twofold on that. I think it can be hard, and it's only as hard as we make it.
Right.
Two of the strategies that I recommend to clients is the first, close your eyes and do yourself a timeline. Literally get a piece of paper, write a line on it, take your hands and make your timeline and start from the littlest you can remember. And when you close your eyes and look, just ask, what emotions do I see?
Mm.
And that very first emotion, you're going to feel like, I can close my eyes and look and I feel the first one. And as soon as you feel that first one, write everything you can remember about that moment, how old you were, who was involved, what you felt physiology in this moment from that memory, and what emotions you remember from that moment. And if you bring the timeline forward for your whole life, you're going to have some very specific moments. Dialing that in just a little bit further to your point, if you already know, like for me and my voice, that's why I use that example. If I bring it specific on my timeline to say, okay, Jen, what were all the moments in life related to your voice that you have negative memories about? And then I can bring forward that timeline and write down age 4, age 3, all those ages, who was involved, what the situation was. Because then the next step that I recommend is then go back to that timeline and say, okay, here was the story I remember. Is it truth? Was I just 4 years old and I didn't know how to digest it at that point? Nobody taught me how to digest it. And then what new story do I want to bring in? And you and I both know, Christy, viewers, for anybody watching, there is probably some cellular, emotional, and some energetic pieces that also need to be changed on that. It's not just one piece. There's a couple pieces to these puzzles. But the neuro changing and the changing of the stories is so key, because if we keep telling ourselves the same stories, then we're going to keep living into the same actions we have in the past.
Yeah. You had so many good things to say there, and I want to comment on all of them, and I'm going to forget it all. First off, Nancy says, yes, it may be difficult, but it's going to be amazing. And I agree completely. The other thing I was going to mention on that is, I love the timeline example and being able to pinpoint different areas where those same things kind of came up. And I really believe that the same things will come up in our lives until we learn the lesson completely. Like, I think that's just kind of for me, at least, I believe it as like a universal principle that the universe is going to keep giving you the same lesson until you learn it. And the one quote that, based on what you were saying about the stories and the narratives that we put behind things, the one quote that I know we both heard at a similar seminar, I believe, was, nothing has meaning except the meaning we give it. Yeah. And I really love that, really, really, really love that. And I say it very, very frequently, because we can choose to give something a positive meaning, or we can choose to give something a negative meaning. Either way, an event is just an event without our subconscious beliefs superimposed on it, without our rose color or, filth colored glasses changing what it actually means to us. And so in each of those moments, we have a choice on how to digest it. When we were young, before 7 years old, our brains and our bodies are just subconsciously kind of downloading information that's not really even ours. We're just we're piecing together what it means to be in this world, what our role is interacting with it. And a lot of those things, once the subconscious kind of semi-closes, so to speak, at 7 years old, all those stories are kind of created, to your point, and they may not even be ours until we look back at it with adult eyes and go, okay, yeah, why did I make that decision about X, Y, or Z? And then we can bring it forward.
Yeah. Again, more good nuggets. One thing on that I've learned for me, and I think that everyone's a little bit different. There's some of the things that I can look back to and say, okay, this was the story. It happened. Like I heard this piece of information, and it's not mine to own in the way I heard it. And it's my choice of redefining it. Mm-hmm. And another thing that I just want to reinforce that I say a lot, and people are probably sick of me saying it, but none of it's good, bad, right, or wrong. It just is. And I think the reason I always say that is, if we make ourselves wrong, we're making ourselves wrong for the way we're being. And none of us are wrong for the way that we're being or living in any way, shape, or form. So there's that. And then the other thing I wanted to come back to, in addition to the timeline exercise, the other thing that I recommend is track your triggers for a month. Track all those moments that you really get frustrated or angry or upset or whatever that is. And when you recognize that trigger, note everything you can about who was involved, what situation encountered, was it work, was it whatever, because then you can dial in, okay, I get triggered every time this happens in these kind of scenarios. And then you can look back to say, where's that root of it from those triggers is another way.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of, I think, specific work and awareness to catch all of it once again and make the commitment to yourself that, okay, I'm tracking these triggers. When something comes up, I'm not going to just ignore it and move on through. I'm actually going to stop and say, okay, what just came up for me, and dig a little bit. And it might be uncomfortable, but that's usually how we grow.
Yeah, completely agree with you. Okay, so I think we kind of just defined our backing it out even one step further. The first step is a decision. It's the decision to say, I'm ready to change. I'm ready to grow. I'm ready to do whatever this thing is to be happier, right? Be more joyful, be more secure in who we are, right?
Yeah.
So then maybe step two, if we were to step it out, maybe step two would be a couple strategies. So try the strategy of timelining, try the strategy of tracking your triggers over the next month and really seeing who and what and why you get frustrated so that you can dial into and then ask, what's the root of it? So where's this stemming from?
Got it.
Do we like that, Christy?
I love it.
Cool. So what's next? We have the information, we have the timeline, we have the triggers.
So I think this all started from how to make sure that we're congruent with an affirmation we're trying to create.
Correct. Yeah.
So in tracking the triggers and then taking it back on the timeline, then after we do that, what are your recommendations for eliminating those subconscious, quote unquote, BS belief systems that we created in our past that may not necessarily serve us or be true?
Yeah. So I think it's looking at each one. So we have our timeline, we have our triggers. It's, again, I'm going to refer to the proverbial rocks, right? Because I think that for me, the rocks are always a good example of all the rocks that we've been carrying for decades. It's taking a look. It's taking a look and saying, this is the story. Do I want to own this? Do I want to own it or throw it away? Do I want to realign it? Like, I kind of like it. I like this part of me, but do I need to redefine it so it doesn't scar me as much? Or, and you're going to love this, Christy, or is this a rock that needed more attention and it's actually a really amazing quality about me that I've made wrong?
Yes.
I can tell you for decades, I made myself wrong for how much of a sensitive, intuitive being I am. And it's my best trait. Like, I am an amazing listener. I get in people's spaces. I truly work to understand people on a very deep level. And I made some of those traits, I made them wrong and bad. Like, are you making some of your best traits wrong and bad? Even though sometimes people can say things that scar you because of that trait, but it may be your best trait. It may be one of those that you just love so much about yourself, and stop making yourself wrong.
Yeah.
So it's really assessing all of that stuff that we have to look at. And then from there, I say pick one or two to start with. Don't try to tackle all of it. Let's pick one or two and get started.
Yeah, I love all of that. Some things just come to mind, and I'm not going to give specific examples necessarily, but just to your point of what you said in, like, let's take a trait that we actually really do truly love about ourselves that is true, and yet someone made wrong or bad in something that they said. There's a lot of reasons that person could have said what they said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
First off, it could have also, I still believe it could have been in our interpretation of what they said. Like, maybe they didn't mean it in the way that it came across. And let's just say, for sake of argument, they did mean it in the way that it came across and they were just being mean or rude. It could have been jealousy. Like, I frequently know that some people say things to other individuals about a quality that they have because they kind of wish that they had that too, and they don't know how to process it or be self-aware of it. And this is talking, like, as children, when we're just trying to figure life out. And some of those things can just come out, and it then harms us. And then we live with that our whole lives, even though if we really carry it back, what that person really wished was that they were that sensitive or that intuitive, for your example.
Yeah, I think that it could be so many different directions. It could be a matter of maybe that truly was their opinion, but that doesn't have to be your opinion.
Right.
Or maybe they said it in a certain way and we interpreted it, to your point, in a different way.
Yeah.
And I think with all of it, it comes down to, it doesn't matter how anyone else says or does things. What matters is, are we in our ground? Are we in that ground to say, okay, here's me, and it doesn't really matter what anyone else says or their personal opinions of me. What matters is, do I love me?
Yeah.
And are you locked solid to say, yeah, I am sensitive. I am very intuitive. I'm very much, I'll shut down judgmental conversations quick because I don't tolerate drama-ish stuff. And it turns people off at times. And I'm okay with that. And when we get so locked solid and like, here's who I am, and this is the person I want to be, it makes it not always easy, but easier to say, okay, well, I'm okay with if you don't want to be in my space. I'm okay with that.
Right. And I think part of the reason some of this comes up is we may not have been okay with that when we were 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old.
Oh, yeah.
Like many people, and I've met some amazing, amazing kids that do have that sense of self that they're just like, yeah, I don't really care if that person likes me or not. And I'm like, good for you at knowing that at 10 years old. I sure as hell didn't.
Oh, I didn't. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that can be really challenging as kids, just because all we want is to be loved and accepted in that stage. And if we don't feel that, we make ourselves wrong and then try to change ourselves. And that's where I think a lot of this stems from.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And you said a really important nugget in there as well, Christy, with regards to you said a different word, but basically comparison. You know, comparison can really, really cause harm to people. And that jealousy of wanting something what someone else has, or even getting overly competitive, you know, to be quote unquote better than other people. Those are all, they can be dangerous for anyone. So
yeah, ultimately all we can be is the best version of ourselves.
Yeah. Again, really defining who we want to be and living into that. Okay, so we looked at it. We know kind of those couple, one or two that we want to work through. What's next? How do you recommend going about defining those? So let's say, for example, let's pick one out and just run it through.
Sure.
Let's pick out the example of, I think that it goes for a lot of people, just that honoring your authentic voice and honoring that authentic, we're talking about it right now, that here's who I am. I love who I am. Whether other people don't or not. I think that this one's a more general one that a lot of people might be able to latch onto. So how would you recommend starting to define that as an affirmation?
First thing that I heard in all that is just keeping it simple and say, I really, really love myself. And that's something I actually muscle test people on a regular basis to be sure that, you know, when so in that same sense of being sure we're going to affirm that I really love myself at the deepest core of who I am, that they test strong to that.
Yeah. It just hit me, and it was a strong reminder. I was working with a client earlier in the week, may have been last week, and this person is working to take an exam, and I'll leave out the specifics, but they've unfortunately had the experience that they've failed a couple times at doing this. So in working on an affirmation for this particular person, an affirmation going from right now, she's set in her, I'm going to fail. That's just her current zone, is I'm going to fail. And working on an affirmation to say, I'm going to pass, I'm going to pass, I'm going to pass. It doesn't work because she does not physiologically believe it. And we'll come back to the chemistry, but even aside from the chemistry, she doesn't believe it yet.
Yeah.
So I think at times we have to look at that gap and we have to just pick an affirmation that's in between.
I love that.
And in this specific example, the affirmation that we aligned with was, I'm going to study hard and do the best that I can on the exam. And just getting locked solid on that affirmation first, because when you're locked solid on that, then you can go to the next. And the next is, I know I'm going to do well on the exam, perhaps. And stepping it up so that over the next number of months, as this person is studying, by the time the exam comes, then it can be closer to, I know I'm going to rock this. I know that I'm going to kick butt at this exam. Maybe not pass, maybe leaving that word out, but at least letting other words behind it come closer.
Yeah, I really love that. Just like taking it one step at a time, because it's like, it's that same, I think you've shared it before, that visual of the ladder where you've got the step from here to here versus a couple in between. It makes a lot more sense to just take it a little bit at a time, because it's more digestible and your brain can get more on board in those little increments. In that same sense, you said something really important that I think, like you said, the words can just be really, really important. Just that word in that example of pass.
Mm-hmm.
We hear pass, our brain can automatically go or fail.
Right.
And immediately flip it, as opposed to, I'm going to excel.
Right.
Your brain's not going to flip excel to fail.
Right.
At least mine doesn't necessarily. Maybe somebody else's would. And that's why, going specifically with what you align, or where your stream of consciousness kind of goes when something comes up.
Right.
But just changing one specific word can kind of, I would say, circumvent some of the subconscious BS that's in there sometimes.
Yeah, agreed. Again, it's words that your brain and body can agree to.
Yeah.
And align with. Just like I love myself. I can tell you that, and I didn't actively recognize it for a long time, because I thought I loved myself. But if I really looked at it, there was definitely something energetically there that needed shifting. And even just from that, guys, for anyone struggling with this piece of it, of just the true loving yourself, choosing other words around it to say, I'm working towards self-love, or whatever lands right for you. Or every day I'm doing something to show myself that I love myself. Excuse me. Things like that will get you closer to then being able to build into, I do love myself. Again, while working with the right cellular emotional release and the right energetic release. So the neural pattern pathways are coming along with it.
Yeah. You'll love this, Jen. So I was with a patient this week, and I swear I was channeling my inner Jen just a little bit, because we were doing some emotional work on their energy timeline, and we were clearing out some guard that this person had had from some childhood trauma. And as we did that, we brought it up to his conscious awareness. We cleared it out. And his response was, yeah, I'm definitely just always a guarded person. And I encouraged him to change the verbiage of just saying that, because to all the points you've ever made in any conversation we've ever had, I heard, you're going to repattern that story in just saying it in that way. So instead of saying, yes, I'm just a guarded person, I have a guard up, I do this, that's who I was, and this is who I'm working to become as I keep working through all this stuff that I'm doing. And just catching those little bitty things, and like we said, increasing the awareness of it. That's me, was like, it's like a trigger. It's just finding it and then reframing it.
Yeah, it's the badges that we put on ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. I mean, if you want to be a guarded person and that's who you choose to be.
Right.
Okay.
He's actively working to not become a guarded person.
Right.
So it was very appropriate to say, okay, hang on.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So bridging the gap, aligning the words that are right. And for me, what I would say is what's next is deciding what you're going to do to pattern those in, right? First and foremost, and Christy, I love to hear your feedback on this as well, is I know that the more ways that you can do the statement helps. Like if you write, speak, see, right? Like the more senses you can bring in to those affirmations, the more your body's going to align with it.
Yes, definitely. And some people align better with certain versions of any of that.
Right.
Some people prefer auditory versus writing versus speaking, acting them in some way. But I definitely agree that the more versions of it that we can do, the better it's going to stick.
Yeah. Okay, so with all of those, coming back to a very key part that you mentioned in the very beginning is the making sure that chemically our bodies are releasing the chemicals that are going to be able to accept whatever we're giving it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the exercises that I take people through is even doing a simple closing your eyes and thinking back to your favorite lifehood memory.
Mm.
Maybe it's a time walking on the beach, or maybe it's a time with you got married or whatever. Just inundate yourself with one amazing life memory and step into that feeling and feel it all over again. Feel the emotions, feel what you saw and what you thought, and then lock it in with another memory of another time. And then lock it in with a third and do as many as you need until your body feels like, oh my gosh, this is so good. I feel so good right now. And then have your affirmations ready. And in that moment, make the switch and start reading and writing it. Because chemically, you just switched your neural path. You just switched your chemistry. I forget what the chemical is, but your brain is literally releasing the chemical that you need to lock those new memories in. And if you can get yourself to that state, it's also a great way to meditate. Is getting yourself in that state before you go into meditation. Again, it's very calming, very relaxing in just the simple art of memory that we already have. Because our bodies remember the good stuff just like they remember the negative stuff.
I wrote all those things down because those were brilliant. Yeah, I don't have anything new to contribute on that. Those were really good.
Thanks. I had a thought and it escaped me. It'll come back. So why is chemicals important? So I know we talked about it a little bit in the beginning. Chemistry is important, number one, because our bodies remember the past, right? They remember all things. Christy, we've brought it up a couple times, and can you explain for all of our viewers, when we talk about affirmations and releasing, again, neural pathways important, what things we're saying, yes, absolutely. You are an expert as it relates to the cellular emotional, neuroemotional technique of really allowing past physiology be released from your cells. Can you explain that to our viewers so that they know how all of that ties together?
Explain what part of it.
Yeah, specifically what I'm alluding to is, and guys, for anyone watching, everything that we've do in life leaves emotional scars on our cells. So the example I like to use is if someone slams the door behind you, you know how your body like completely shudders and shakes? That slamming the door just left cellular memory on your cells. So every time you think that's going to happen again, even if it doesn't, your body's going to respond in the same way because it has that memory. Essentially, like a tiger chasing you, you essentially feel like a tiger's chasing you all the time in those moments. Another example would be if you had a moment in childhood, you had to go speak up in front of a class and you felt like the kids were laughing at you or the teacher picked on you or whatever have you. That cellular memory comes into every other time you go to talk in front of class until you break that cellular memory.
Right.
For anyone who's not familiar, part of Christy's expertise within her holistic chiropractic practice is neuroemotional technique in really diving into those past memories and essentially alleviating them from the cells, right?
Yeah.
Can you, go more into that, Christy.
Okay. So you actually explained it very beautifully. The other example that I can kind of give, and then I'll segue into it, is if anyone's ever heard of the Pavlovs dog experiment, 60s, maybe even earlier. I can't remember how long. No, it was definitely earlier than the 60s. I can't remember when it was done. But researchers had a bunch of dogs and they showed them a bunch of meat and they would salivate. And the way that they did it is they would ring the bell, they would show them the meat, the dogs would salivate. And they did this over and over and over again. So much that eventually they took the meat away and they would just ring the bell, and just at the sound of ringing the bell, the dogs would salivate because they knew meat was coming. And they would just ring the bell, no meat was present, yet they would still have that physiological response because it was conditioned. It was the research showing classical conditioning. Humans do this too. Now, eventually the dogs figured out, okay, there's no reason for us to salivate anymore because there's no more meat here. It took some time, but they eventually were able to uncondition themselves to that initial stimulus. Human beings don't really do that, especially when we're talking subconscious things. So like the bell is a subconscious trigger that we don't even know exists, consciously speaking, until we really become aware of it. And so to your example of like a door or something that happened in our childhood, something similar but not necessarily exact can happen in our adult life that then is like that proverbial bell, and we respond in the exact same way as our 5-year-old did in that moment. Even though we're not 5, we're 35 or 45 or whatever we are, we respond in those same ways. And so if we can, so through the work that I'll do, we'll find that current event that's problematic in your cells, problematic in your conscious mind, and then say, okay, let's take that back, energetically speaking. What emotion is it? What pathway is it through? What even acupuncture system, an organ system meridian is it related to? Find that original event where it occurred and where that original trauma became an issue, and clear that energetically and physiologically from your system, so that now you come back to the present and you say, okay, well, that thing is still an issue, but the emotional charge behind it is no longer there. So then you can actually come to that current situation with rational thought instead of emotional pre-programming.
Right. And guys, that's where the new phrases come in. That's where the new positive affirmations come in to change the neural pathways and change the actual stories behind the habits, essentially.
Right.
So again, all connected. Love it. Okay. What else, Christy? What else have we missed as it relates to affirmations, successfully building affirmations that work and that will help make shifts in the areas that you're looking for?
One thing that you taught me, and it was through Louise Hay's work, is doing them in the mirror. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. To me, it's a simple concept. It's knowing what your affirmations are. To me, it's still chemistry, because even still having the right chemistry as you look yourself in the mirror, guys, when we look at ourselves and we hear our own voice and we see our own self, we're more apt to believe it when we see it directly.
Mm-hmm. There's been studies to show, independent of any affirmations or any physical words being spoken, there's been research to show that people who look at themselves in the mirror every day and just smile,
Yeah,
can't help but overcome depression more easily.
Yeah.
Because not only are your muscles firing and you're feeding the neurologic pathways that your brain goes, oh, I'm smiling, I must be happy. That's its own independent thing. But then even seeing it,
yeah,
it gets it's reinforced. And so the same thing goes for when you're looking at yourself doing an affirmation. It's reinforced with different pathways, different senses.
yeah. I can tell you I'm that person who in my bathroom mirror where I get ready in the morning, I have an affirmation written right on my mirror. And I'll change in and out. And actually, it's pretty cool now because my husband will add words here and there. So
I love it.
Fun. Awesome.
Yeah, I have something written up on my mirror and I haven't changed it in like a year. And now it's just background because our body just gets used to it being there until we once again bring it to our conscious awareness and then read it, which I do sometimes. But changing it frequently is probably a really good idea.
Yeah, I change it frequently and I read it literally every day, whatever that phrase is. And the way that I dial it in is, what do I need right now? Like, what is that thing that is showing up for me right now that's causing me, best way I can describe it, that thing that's causing me to get out of my peaceful physiological state, that's the one that I need to work on. And that's the one that goes on my mirror, whatever that looks like, because that's the one that's clearly most present to me.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. Any other tips, suggestions as it relates to writing successful affirmations?
It's going to sound kind of silly, but just do them.
Yeah, nothing works without action.
I mean, I hate to say this out loud, especially on a live. I have a bunch right here next to my wall, and I don't do them every day. They're there, and I do look at them from time to time, and they're not necessarily a regular part of my routine.
Yeah, I have I'm religious about it. And I actually have my notebook that I write in daily. And sometimes, and guys, do what feels right for you. For me, my affirmations come in the form of gratitude. And I combine the two. And I not only think about them, but I write them every morning. And I make sure that those are, I'm adamant about it because I recognize, and I haven't always been. And I recognize for me, when I get off for a few weeks and I don't do it, something sparks. Something, I have a negative day, something happens that triggers me in a way that it wouldn't have if I was just consistent with my routine. And it doesn't have to take a whole lot of time. The thing of it is the first thing that we say to ourselves in the morning can be the most impactful. For me, I am adamant about the first thing that I do in the morning. I immediately turn on, I love myself because. And those are literally the very first things that I do as soon as I wake up in the morning. And just a little tip, you guys, if you wake up in the middle of the night with anxiousness, get in the habit of I love myself because and finish that sentence. It will help with the anxiety and the worries.
I love that. It was, I believe it was actually you that taught me, and I do this every morning now before I even get out of bed. The second I realize I'm awake, I think of something I'm grateful for and just list 3 to 5 things before I even get out of bed.
Yep.
And in that, so we have a few more Facebook comments from the same person. Ian Levine says, "Happy Friday. Interesting discussion. Affirmations are very powerful."
Yes.
So thanks for watching, Ian.
Agreed. Thank you. Okay, cool. So quick run through as a list, and maybe we'll write it in the comments as well. Decide what you want to change. Take a look at yourself and all those rocks you have in your bag that need to be looked at, need to be examined. Decide. Look through those rocks and say, okay, what do I want to align with? What do I need changing? What do I want to throw away? And what needs more attention? And then from there, determine what, I lost my train of thought. Determine what your affirmations are with the right gap structure. So instead of going from fail to pass, what are those in between words that you can say and those things that you can bring behind an affirmation to write in a way that you're going to believe it and is going to land with you. Do them every day. To Christy's point, action's key. Nothing works without action. And then again, bring the right chemistry behind it. And guys, if you ever have questions or comments or anything that we can do to help you in any of these areas, reach out to us anytime. We'd love to help. Did I miss anything, Christy?
Not at all. Ian said one more comment that I really want to read because it was beautifully said. It says, I listen to self-talk every day, use positive affirming self-talk every day. I even play self-talk while sitting at my desk at work.
Love
and
it.
So it can just be kind of literally playing in the background, even if it's not an active writing of something and performing it. Yeah, I think that's really always very important.
Yeah.
Repetition.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's a really good, it was recently brought into my awareness, and I didn't really think about it as heavily until then. Even the TV in the background is programming your brain. So let good things program your brain.
Right.
Put something, to Anne's point, put something good in the background and let that play in the background. So even though you're not really conscious to it, your subconscious is taking all that in. That's smart. I like that a lot.
Right.
Thanks for the tip, Anne. Love it.
Yes, thank you.
Cool. All right, guys. Thank you for joining us. As always, if there's ever a specific topic that you would like to hear about or have us engage with, let us know. We'd love to hear. And we will see you next week. Christy and I are going to be at speaking at a conference in Michigan on Friday. So we're going to be here on Thursday, same time, 10 o'clock.
Sounds
Awesome.
good. Thanks.
All right, guys. Have a good day.